Thanks for choosing to listen to this Late Night Linux Family podcast. We're only able to do this because of the people who support us. None of our shows are paywalled, but our Patreon supporters can get most episodes early and never hear any ads. Learn more at latenightlinux.com/support or support us by telling a friend or colleague about everything we do.
Hybrid Cloud Show, episode 62. I'm Aaron.
I'm Gary.
I'm Sean.
And I'm Shane.
So today I was thinking about my little setup at home, and it made me wonder about some of the things I've learnt over time in doing that. And so I thought I'd ask all of you about what the biggest mistakes were that you've made in your home labs, your home setups, similar, and what you'd do differently now, having made those mistakes.
I think my biggest mistake is probably pretty typical, maybe. So what comes to mind is I would set up a server initially manually. I'd be editing /etc files and doing lots of configuration. And I'd know that I shouldn't be doing this. This box is going to break someday and I'm going to lose everything. That was well understood, like this is a problem. My mistake was I would use initially things like SaltStack, if anyone remembers that, or Chef or Puppet. You know those like tools that like configure servers? And I'd start off with the greatest intentions. I'd set everything up and I'd do all the right things, and then I'd have to start fixing something. And then the mistake is really I'd start manually changing things basically to like get round it. And then it would accrue, and I would never bring it back into the salt state. What I was using was SaltStack. And inevitably, I basically wiped my home lab effectively. I think there was like disk corruption. And I was like, oh, it's okay. I've got my salt state files or whatever the hell they were called. And I tried recovering it. And obviously it did not do anything. It was worse than nothing. So I just started from scratch. They were worthless basically. And I think like that shape of tooling, I just never got on with. I never really liked it as a way to like vend applications on servers. And the thing I've kind of learned and changed is that what really drove this was actually Docker Compose. It was running containers and having them being like really isolated from the operating system. The bit I didn't like about SaltStack is like, okay, edit this etc file here and then make this change over here. My files are over here. It's still like this kind of distributed mess. Whereas with containers, it's all kind of in one place, right? And it's kind of an elegant interface. And so with Docker and Docker Compose in particular, it just was so much more easy to reason about the things you were running about and just shove all that stuff up to Git. So if everything blew up, it was only a couple of minutes recovery away. I mean, obviously the data is still a problem, but in terms of like the actual running operating system. So I think depending on, I think we've taken this to the next level of like GitOps and Kubernetes, etc. But just that change from like half-heartedly believing you've done everything in IAC and losing everything and learning from that and then being like, okay, there's a better way to do this now. As much as I love Kubernetes and how awesome it is, it was not as much of a step change as it was going to Docker and Docker Compose.
I think every time that Gary talks about how disciplined he is and never logging into his servers, I shift a little uncomfortably.
But then I think my habit was born out of exactly what you were sharing, Shane, right? It's I would go and build a box and then I'd tweak a config on it and forget about it and go, oh, I'll backport that back to my Ansible later on. And then I'd never do it. And I'd provision a box and then I'd go, oh, why is DNS mask running on this box? I didn't want DNS mask running on this box. I thought I'd taken that off. And of course I had. And then at the next LTS, I'd blown the box away and rebuilt it. And then everything was broken again. And I had to work out what I did before. And of course, I didn't have the old install anymore. So I disciplined myself to not ever get into those situations.
Did you guys ever run Ansible Tower, or it was later called AWX?
Not in my home lab.
Well, the only native way to really do it is to run it on Kubernetes. So I'm already at a problem here because I need Kubernetes to run my Ansible scripts. And it's like basic stuff. It's just like, every Sunday, like update my packages or stuff, or like, hey, doing rolling releases or whatever. And even then it was so much overhead, man.
That's a strange choice for them, actually. Now that you say it, like to run this product, you need to kind of host it on sort of a sideways competitor of ours. That's a very strange decision.
Well, generally, I think that first provisioning piece is always fascinating. Like, you hear about these companies and they've never really tested the complete from scratch situation, and everything depends on everything else until you can't pick up everything together. It all needs that whole provisioning story to be existing before they can start. And I think that about quite a lot of these IAC tools or similar. I can look at some of them and I'm thinking, well, I can do it so long as I've got any one of these things. But as soon as I lose all of them, I'm in real trouble. And then I'm not quite sure how I get back from backups. I'm thinking here things like, encryption keys and, those really basic pieces, where are you starting from? Sometimes I have to think those things through quite slowly to make sure that if I lost both my phone and my home desktop or whatever in a fire, would I still be able to recover everything?
Well, and that's what appealed to me about Ansible, right? Is that if I lost my entire infrastructure, as long as I had my playbooks, I could just go and run those from a laptop or even run them on a laptop and be back to a reasonably working state. Secrets and stuff I've always stored out of band in a password manager, or certainly somewhere where they're not in my own infrastructure. So I've not had that same bootstrapping problem, I guess.
I think, Gary, your description of your Ansible playbooks being a very reliable thing you can rerun might underpin your ability to write those. As in, I've definitely had playbooks where it's depended on mount points or dev UUID disk names or some network adapter that I totally thought would be the same in the next machine I brought it onto. Those sorts of things are why I still quite like containers for like abstracting all that crap away, because there's something in there that just makes me always mistrust, not the tool, but my own ability to use the tool.
But you've got to build the box the containers run on, right? I mean, that's basically what my playbooks are doing. And all of the stuff you mentioned about network adapters and setting IPs and mount points and things, I deal with at the provisioning of the box with cloud init scripts or something. I mean, that's the way I've abstracted that particular problem away, is cloud init sets the network addresses, it makes sure the volumes are mounted in the right places, and then the Ansible playbook comes over the top of that.
Tangents to this, there are like OSs like CoreOS, which are kind of designed for what you want, Shane, where they're like mostly immutable, but like just very lightweight, and you just run your containers on them. They're meant for container workloads. The issue is that you have to use, I think it's Butane or Kickstart or all these different Cloud Init scripts that aren't Cloud Init, because Cloud Init is well supported, well, loved by the industry, and I'm not doing whatever they want me to do with that. I just absolutely refuse.
I think for me, my biggest mistake has been thinking that I could build hardware better than Dell could.
Oh, damn. What does that mean?
So I've toyed over the years with various different incantations of custom-built servers because I thought they would meet my needs better. So my most recent foray into this was with some AliExpress N150 motherboards, thinking, oh, that's great. The N150 is super performant in terms of performance per watt. It's everything I need. It has a decent quick sync decoding. And what I ended up with was 3 boxes that were about as performant as I wanted them to be, and for a while were about as stable as I wanted them to be. However, they were never as power efficient as I thought they would be. I mean, you see the stories of the N150 style mini PCs drawing single-digit watts at idle. I never achieved that with the boxes that I built.
Were you getting like 20 or were you getting like 80?
Oh, no, it was still like 25, 30 watts, but that's still 3x what I would have got if I'd just gone and bought something from Dell or HP, right? So I think that's the biggest mistake I've made, is building out that hardware myself and it just never quite living up to what I'd hoped it would be. So now I have a cluster of 3 Dell mini PCs, and those genuinely are consuming single-digit watts. I mean, the Wise 5070 I've got that's my Plex box is consuming like 2 watts at idle or something ridiculous. And then I've got some kind of small form factor Optiplex with a 13th gen i3, And again, that's like sub 10 watts and is way more performant than those N150 boxes were.
I did a pass of my homelab, and the power consumption and the laptops are drawing like 5 to 10x what the Dell Wise is. I also realized they're running super hot, probably because the thermal paste is like worn off. So I have some admin to do in terms of just like probably replacing those machines with maybe some more Dell Wise machines and putting some thermal paste on.
Well, genuinely, the Optiplex Micro or the Lenovo counterpart, I've had really good luck with over the years. There's a Lenovo model, I think it's an M90, and there's probably newer models available. But those things have multiple NVMe SSD slots, they have multiple RAM slots. They're everything that the Dell ought to be, but are Lenovo, so they're a little bit more difficult to find.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have a dig because I will need to buy a few more, I think. I really want to reduce the power consumption of this thing. It's getting problematic.
I have nothing here to contribute because I have 3 rack servers that just chug electricity, and I don't even want to know what those numbers look like.
But it's fine for you because power's cheap where you are, right?
Yeah, isn't it like free or something in Texas?
Cheap-ish, yeah, sure. Let's go with that.
I think over the years, generally, I have started to be less ridiculously cheap about hardware and stuff. So instead of tethering some filthy USB drive to some, piece of secondhand hardware, I'm a little more inclined to try and buy something that's actually fit for purpose.
No, that's wrong. What you want to do is take all your crap and put it into a Kubernetes cluster. So it's what we do, Aaron. It's called horizontal scaling. It's not one big awesome machine. It's a ton of crap ones, basically.
I think for me, the problem is that my family now rely on this stuff. So when it was just me and I didn't really care if it was down for 12 hours and I'd just fix it when I had time to grab a coffee, it was fine. But now my kids are shouting because they can't watch Toy Story or the DNS isn't working or something like that. It's just a pain. And I just need something that I can set and forget. Hence why the Plex server is a physical box that if it died, I have another one of and I can just pull the SSD out and put it in the other one and it will just boot and it's fine.
You're definitely right, Gary. There's moments where my kids are watching Thomas the Tank Engine or something and the loading bar on the screen is loading a little bit too long and I'm wondering, have I fired a bunch of emails at paperless and it's now doing a bunch of OCR and that's taking out Thomas the Tank Engine? Uh-oh. So yeah, probably wise to have your critical production things separate from stupid crap.
Noisy neighbors. Come on, guys. First principles.
I also think sometimes you have to be burnt by something before you start caring about it properly. And so I always used to use sort of second-hand, hand-me-down bits and pieces of hardware that I had. And I used to have originally what is now my server started life as a second-hand Dell desktop that someone gave me that I was using to do TV tuning, and then that just had a big enough hard drive that I used it for other things. And, this thing has Ship of Theseus its way to what it is today. But originally I had this plastic Dell case, and changing hard drives in it or whatever was this real horrible operation, and replacing that with one of the nice sort of fractal node cases or whatever where I can just take a side off and slide trays out and all those nice things. You're like, now I understand why people pay hundreds of pounds for a case.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's buying that stuff that's a couple of years old, like off corporate lease, has been pretty successful, or just going and buying like a decent known stable board. I mean, I still have one of those N100 boxes in service as my offsite backup, but that was a really nice Asus board that it was like 90 odd pounds for the motherboard alone, but it's been worth every penny because those 2 other boards that I bought are basically e-waste after a year.
That was another learning for me, was that when I bought a motherboard that I knew I was going to have to get everything working on Linux with, I just bought another one and I stuck that in the other box because I knew at least then my problems would be the same. Even once I'd got things working, I knew that I had something that would be identical in another box.
I can't believe we're talking about a motherboard you bought a year ago being, obsolete. It's moving fast, guys.
My motherboard is from 2016, so it is been revised up to the I think the server I'm running at the moment. I put an Intel. I don't know which one it was, the Ice Lake or whatever. There was one of them that had the HEVC with the tone mapping being able to be done for that in the hardware, but that was about as much as I could upgrade that chip because it's so old, and I had to buy it on eBay. So one day that thing will get an N150 upgrade or something, but for now it is chugging along, 10 years old.
Yeah, I mean, I was having this hardware conversation with Chris from Linux After Dark because my Plex server ran out of disk space. It turns out there are only so many thumbnails you can store on a 32 gig SSD.
Oh my gosh.
Use the internal SSD. That's awesome.
I was, yeah. I mean, not for the media storage. That was all mounted over NFS. But, yeah, Varlib Plex media server was just on the internal drive. And, I've got a Chinese mini PC with an N95. Do I use that? Or do I just go and drop 30 quid on a 120 gig SSD for this box? And he talked me around to just go and buy the SSD for the more reliable machine. So I still not got a use for the N95 mini PC, but those kind of things are the types of mistakes that I've made in the past is, this is way more bang for my buck than that old Dell. But actually, the Dell has proven itself to be stable over many years now. I mean, it was my firewall for the longest time before I got a Unify one.
Y'all's mistakes make my stuff sound so much worse. I'm talking data loss over here, and you guys are like, I didn't buy the right box.
Man, I've never lost any data, so I feel like I need to hear that story.
All right, let's talk about this. So how did data loss occur? Data loss occurred because I didn't have notifications set. And TrueNAS was complaining to me, hey, this drive is throwing errors. Should probably fix it. And I have 2 VDEVs of mirrors. So if one of the drives dies, that means I'm still good. I still have another one. The problem is they were 2 of the same drives I had just gotten together. And so this one was also failing very quickly. So when I realized it, finally, by just checking in, seeing if there was an update, I realized, I need to get a drive ASAP. So I got a drive ASAP. I replaced the one that was actively failing. And when I did so, I opened my box, no problems. And I pulled out the SATA cables, no problems. And I put the drive in, slide it in its tray, cool, close it all together. And then I'm putting the SATA drive connector back in, but it feels loose. And I'm like, this is interesting. So I track out my motherboard. And on the other side is the, what do you want to call it? The female end and the male end together of the SATA cable. So somehow I've ripped the port off of the motherboard.
Ooh, that's a problem.
That is a problem. So I ended up getting one of those M2 adapters that give you like 4 SATA ports. And I put it in that thing and I said, this will have to do. Let's move on. And then TrueNAS boots up and it's saying, you have a new drive. I assign it to the pool and it says, great. It'll take 1 month to resilver.
Because of the adapter? Or what? Why?
Great question, Shane. I didn't know. So I go, I check and I look and I'm just making sure everything's connected properly because obviously faulty cable. That's bit us all before. And I could not find a reason. I swapped cables. I made sure the drive was good. I tested it. The other drive just was having a real tough time trying to resilver too because it was also dying.
Yeah, see, I feel like I have heard this horror story from enough people that anytime I buy a mixed pair of drives, I then make a note to myself that 6 months later, go and buy a third drive and then pull the second drive out of the mirror, put the new drive in, let it resilver, and then use the original drive as an on-shelf spare. What that's led to in the past is me having like a bunch of 1 terabyte SSDs sat on a shelf because I've like swapped out a single one from the pair of a mirror whenever I've seen an offer on.
Yes, I always try to buy a Western Digital and a Seagate for my pairs. Or I had a Hitachi GST or whatever for the longest time. I got something like 12 years of uptime on that hard drive before I finally retired it. It didn't die. I wish I could still buy them, but I always try and get different vendors so they'll at least fail in different ways when I'm putting them in mirrors.
All very smart things that I hope our listeners learn from. Because I said, good enough, I can't be arsed, I'm moving on. And when I went to check, I think it was like 2 weeks later, the other drive had died and the resilver was not completed. And so that thing was gone.
Oh,
Oh, man. And you didn't have backups that you could easily restore from? Or
No, I had backups, of course. Come on, I've been preaching this a long time, but still a very painful lesson. If I had just gotten another motherboard or maybe gotten a better adapter, I'm pretty sure it was the adapter. That thing did not feel secure, but yeah, lesson learned.
Yeah, I've bought those M.2 to SATA adapters before. And it's like got 6 ports on and an AS Media SATA controller. And it's okay in a pinch. I'd maybe trust it in a backup box, but I had one in my primary storage box and also had all sorts of weird issues with drives dropping out of pools and things that I just, never buy those things. They're not worth it. Just go and buy a proper PCI Express card.
Yeah. So everyone's saying, though, that the 2 Seagate Iron Wolf 16 terabyte drives I bought at the exact same time and have been running in a ZFS pool for the last while, they're good to go forever, yeah. I don't need to think about anything else.
Sure, I definitely wouldn't swap one of them out about now, so that at least you're hedging your bets a bit.
Probably 6 months after where I should have done this. Okay, this is good to know. All right, and if nothing else, I've learned something.
so this reminded me of a story that one of my colleagues told me, and I couldn't do anything but look at him in horror. But he was telling me about how he had gone and bought one of the Synologies with a bunch of drives, and I don't know how many, but I think he said he spent about $2,000 on this thing with drives and and things, whatever. And then he said, and I tried to do it all properly, and I bought a second identical one and put that at my parents' house, and I wired them up so that it was instantly syncing using the fancy Synology syncy thing between them. And he was telling me that he'd got ransomware where someone had got into this thing and encrypted all of his media on this Synology, but he hadn't set up any versioning on it. So it got immediately replicated to the backup thing at his parents' house. So he dropped like $4,000 on doing it all properly, but because he hadn't configured it right, he ended up losing absolutely everything.
That's a good disaster story. I hope your friend learned something from it. Jesus.
Well, as it turns out, replication is not necessarily a backup, right?
100%.
And it can be awful, right? That's the thing. I think that sometimes with some of, the whole ZFS setup I've got is in theory perfect, but I do sometimes have that kind of fear that maybe I will end up replicating a problem that I didn't expect to.
Yeah, well, this is why I've standardized on that thing of like, I want 4 weeklies kept and 12 monthlies kept and 7 dailies kept, because at least if I really mess stuff up, I've got some time to notice and recover from it.
So one thing that I think I've even mentioned before, but that bit me a long time ago and is a hard-learned lesson, was I put a PHP form, I think it was, up on my personal home server and then left it open to the internet, and then asked in a forum for help on how to configure something, and some miserable person out on the internet came and visited my server and started browsing through all my files. And that gave me enough of a kind of fright and feeling of violation that ever since I've been too scared to put anything on the public internet and used all of these things like, Nebula and Tailscale and all these kinds of things instead, so that most of my stuff is not actually on the internet. Now, one day I'll grow up and do some proper reverse proxies or something for the things I want. But in the meantime, I feel a lot more comfortable knowing things are behind an overlay network.
Was he funny about it? Did he leave you a message being like, I own all your bases or anything?
No, sadly. I mean, I did get all the logs because I had a bunch of friends who were in the space. And so I got all of the relevant logs, and I even submitted them to the cyber crime unit of the police at the time. And yeah, exactly. It was about as effective as you can imagine.
Yeah, I think maybe in the early days of my playing around with computers, I probably did something similar. Does anyone remember Dyn DNS?
Yeah.
It was like a dynamic DNS provider where because your home IP would change constantly, they would just update that. I remember at some point having a Dyn DNS thingy pointing at my website, and I was hosted in my house, but I think I remember hearing enough horror stories like yours, Aaron, where I was like, no way am I going to do this. I think I actually had, it was called like a Tenido people may or may not remember this, but it's like a little box, like a pre-Raspberry Pi type thing, where it's like a box you plug in, and it's got a little machine in it, and then you can plug in an Ethernet cable in the top and plug it into your Ethernet port, and then it hosted like a couple of apps they'd made, like I can't remember now, calendars or weather or something. But yeah, I think it was that I put on the internet and got promptly very scared and turned it off.
Tinito, I don't know, but they were ahead of their time. That sounds cool.
Yeah. So, you know the way we were all talking about don't be cheap about things? Well, I tried to be cheap about things. When we were talking about backup plans for the homelab recently, what I realized was that I have a family iCloud account with 2 terabytes of storage. Now, I don't use any of that storage, but I'm controlling the family plan. My wife uses 400 gigabytes of storage for like photos and things. And so I was like, that's a lot of storage that no one's using. I wonder if I can make use of that and just back up the old Kubernetes cluster to this.
Oh, Shane.
Yeah, so in theory, you can. It's not the best flow in that you have to log in on a browser, get a cookie from the browser, and then use that cookie with Orclone, if anyone's familiar with that. It's like a way of sending files to like different destinations. And so what I was doing was I was actually taking ZFS snapshots, splitting them up, and then sending them very, very small files, because iCloud doesn't really like large files, particularly when you're using something that's reverse engineered the iCloud protocol. So I was running this for a while, and then something broke, and the backup went a bit crazy and filled iCloud.
Wait. What broke? Did something break on the iCloud side or on your side?
My side. I basically wasn't purging the backups and effectively filled the iCloud server. Yeah, it was saying something on iCloud.com like you're using like 3 terabytes out of your 2 terabyte plan. So I don't even know what I did. And my wife was not happy because now her phone is no longer really functioning because it's full and nothing can get pushed up to iCloud anymore. And so, okay, gotta fix this. All right, no worries. I'll go on to iCloud.com and delete all these files. And that looked like it was doing something. I don't believe it was. What iCloud should do is like it deletes all your files, which it did, and then it goes into recently deleted, and then after a month, those files should purge. The problem was I wanted to delete the recently deleted files immediately. However, that page wouldn't render on the website because there was too many files in that folder, I think. So I was like, that's okay. I'll wait for the 30-day thingy to just auto-purge.
Oh, my God.
I waited the 30 days, and my wife very upset at this point, and then nothing purged. It all just stood there. And I was like, cool. I now need to talk to Apple customer support because there's nothing I can do on mine. Literally, like I can't do anything.
Hi, Apple customer support. I was fisting these files in.
I've been backing up my homelab. That's all right, yeah? These are encrypted ZFS snapshots. That's totally cool.
Apple, you have to help me. My wife is mad at me. Please.
Yeah. Come on. Do me a solid, Apple. So what I learned was the hellscape that is Apple customer support. I filled iCloud 4 months ago. I waited that month for it to auto-purge. It didn't auto-purge. In the last 3 months, I have been with Apple customer support trying to fix this. My ask is simple. Purge the data from my account. Just purge it all. I don't care. Keep my wife's intact, but purge mine. And what has happened is I have been routed through the customer success loop 5 times. So that has meant me going to first line support saying, okay, cool, here's my problem. Please, God, escalate me. And then they escalate me. And then it's like, all right, senior person. Okay, yeah, take control of the computer again. Oh my God, yeah, okay, yeah, it still doesn't make sense, just like the last time. And I'm getting really angry this side. I'm like, just read the notes. Read the notes from the last time. They don't read the notes. They need to do it all again. And every time they're like, oh, it sounds like we need to go to mystical engineering. I've gotten really far into this. I'm about 4 calls deep into this one loop. And they're like, okay, we need to escalate you to engineering and they'll help. They escalate me to engineering. The person is like, I'm about to jump off from work right now. So I need to, I can't help you right now. I'm also going on holidays for next week and a half. So I'll just schedule a call back, or I'll send you an email and you can schedule a call back. I get the email. Next day, I'm like, okay, let's do this engineering. Takes you straight back to first line support again, the 5th time. And so I've lost the will to live here. So what I've now done is my wife has, and I should have thought of this from the beginning, my wife has her own iCloud account. I'm now terminating my iCloud account. And so wherever these 2 gigabytes of data or 3 gigabytes of data are being taken up in Apple servers, I'm not going to be paying for it. They will. So screw you, Apple, and your shoddy customer support.
Wait, what about your wife's data, like her photos and stuff?
So it's just a billing construct. It's not like her files are on my iCloud. It's just that she's using my iCloud subscription.
Yeah, you're just paying the bill, right?
So I just have her pay for her own bill, and I and my completely tanked iCloud are just free to expire and die, and Apple can deal with that later. I hope it really screws someone up in Apple dealing with this, but it's not my fault anymore, or problem. It's all my fault. It's not my problem.
Shane, I'm not sure you've taken the right lesson from this.
I think I have. Don't trust customer support. Just I don't know.
Just say, I'm not paying my bill anymore.
Exactly. That's it. That's the lesson. As long as I'm not paying, I don't care.
Well, we better get out of here so that you can get back on the Apple customer support, Shane. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Until then, I've been Aaron.
I've been Gary.
I've been Sean.
And I've been Shane.
See you later.